you please be my data guest? Won't you please be my data guest? Won't you please be my data guest today? Hooray!
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Hooray!
Thanks.
Okay, so let me introduce. So welcome everybody to this episode of the My Data Guest series. I and Alessandro have discussed long on what the topic of this first episode could be. So I wanted something more educational. Alessandro wanted something more like casual. But on one thing we both agree. We both wanted to start this podcast with a big boom. We wanted to invite some big and highly respected personalities in the field of AI, and we wanted to show that we are being serious about delivering both new information and more classic education. So now, did we manage to create this big boom? I would say yes. We have here today, the first big boom is Joshua Starmer. Joshua, who doesn't know Joshua? He's the author of the StatQuest series on YouTube. I think he has educated millions of people about statistics and machine learning. And you can recognize him by the ukulele. He has it in many of the photos, in many of the videos. So check his channel, StatQuest on YouTube. Absolutely worth it. Then another big boom is Miguel Otero Pedrido. Miguel is the owner of the Neural Maze on Substack. The Neural Maze has a very practical focus to make you become an AI engineer. Correct me if I'm wrong. The title of his last article is 5 Steps to Become an AI Engineer. So check the Neural Maze for more practical information on how to become a machine learning AI engineer. And then we have Luis Serrano, and again, another big boom. Luis is the founder of the Serrano Academy. There, Luis makes all sorts of concepts and algorithms in machine learning and computer science digestible for everybody. His explanations, even the most complex concepts, make the topic easy and understandable. His most recent activity goes in the direction of quantum computing, and that's actually a challenge to make quantum computing easy to understand for everybody. And finally, the last big boom, Alessandro Romano. Alessandro is an AI engineer. He can build any AI application with almost any tool in a very short time. I have witnessed that. He was already famous for his tutorial on building AI agents with Crew AI, and is now working on a similar tutorial using an A10. Not yet published, but it will probably be as popular as the Crew AI tutorial. Okay, so since we, actually Alessandro, have managed to assemble such a great panel of experts, we thought of offering an Ask Me Anything session around AI. We have collected a few questions on social media in the past days, and I'm ready to ask them. So are you ready?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so the first question. How do you know each other?
It's a tough one. Maybe I can start because I'm not the host, but I feel like I am the host because this podcast is our podcast, but I'm only answering questions today. Well, we met in Bangalore, the four of us, and I say this is my answer. So we met in Bangalore. I met Miguel a bit earlier because we were on the same airplane, and we met in Bangalore because we were the speakers for this data hack organized by Analytics Media. And I'm gonna stop here because maybe you can also answer and add more details to it because I think it's interesting to see what kind of details you can add to this story. But for sure, we met in Bangalore for the Data Hack Summit. Luis, your turn.
So actually, I met Josh before, because about a year maybe before we started talking, I was in Cohere, and we were talking to influencers, and they said, can you message some influencers, this guy Josh? And I'm like, oh, I'm a huge fan already. So I messaged him, and we started talking and creating lives together, which you're all invited to our lives, by the way. We should love to have you in our sort of monthly lives. Sometimes more months pass between one another, and then we actually met in person in Switzerland because we went to he invited me to this conference in Switzerland called Uphill, and so then Bangalore was the second time. But Alessandro and Miguel, I did meet in Bangalore. Miguel is cool because we started speaking Spanish. Alessandro as well. We became friends very quickly and started talking and having fun like this.
Yeah, for me, I knew I was going to go to Bangalore, but I didn't want to be there all by myself, so I invited Luis to come and help me out with my workshop because I was so scared I couldn't talk for that long. And I met Alessandro and Miguel. I don't know, did we meet in the lobby? I think immediately we got into an Uber and went downtown, or we got into a cab and went to downtown Bangalore. We got stuck in a lot of traffic. We met a really pushy cab driver. We had a great adventure. We went through Cubbon Park and we saw some. Did we see some snakes? We might have seen some snakes. And yeah, I remember we were like, hey, let's go hang out. And so we had a great time that day. It was super fun.
Yeah, in fact, just adding one tiny bit of information to Josh's story. I don't know if you remember, Josh, but I remember that we met on the elevator. I think you were coming from like running or going to the gym or something like that. And I was like, are you Josh from StatQuest? And you were like, yes. I was like, oh, great. We are going to Bangalore Center. And you were like, oh, yeah, I know some places. Yeah. Can I join? And I was like, wow, of course you can join. So, yeah. So funny.
Yeah, Josh, you were coming from the spa. Coming from the spa, say it.
Yeah.
Now you can say it.
At least nobody said, I don't know these people. I don't know why I'm here.
Who are these people? We had a great week together. It was super. It was like every day was super fun. Yeah, I had a great time.
Yeah. Now we have a WhatsApp group called Snakes. What is it? Snakes and Speakers or something? Because of the snakes in the park. I was not there for the snakes part. I arrived a day late. So I remember I was like, hey guys, we should open a WhatsApp group. And we were all like, haha, way ahead of you, buddy. So they invited me to Snakes and Speakers WhatsApp group.
Yeah, maybe, you don't know about this, but essentially we were a kind of silly story, but we were out, we were visiting the city center, and at some point, Joshua was really well prepared about, like, I don't know, being in Bangalore. He had a lot of experience from last year. And at some point he was like, guys, be careful to that. You can do that. If you do that, it's cool. If you visit that, it's even better. And then at some point it was like, but be careful because there are a lot of snakes. I was like, what? We were in the city center. Traffic jam. And I was like, snakes? I only see cars. It was like, yeah, but if you go close to the park, there will be snakes. And then I thought it was joking, honestly. But at some point we saw this signal saying, be careful to the snakes. And I was like, oh, okay. And we took a picture, and then a few minutes later we had to create a WhatsApp group, and we called it Speakers and Snakes. The snakes are real, apparently, so that's it.
And fun fact about that, Alessandro, because maybe you forgot, we actually saw a snake, but it was a snake attacked by one of the eagles or falcons that they were in there. I don't know if you remember, in the Bangalore Palace, we saw an eagle flying with a snake in the beak. So it was like, wow.
That was an adventure, this conference.
This is crazy.
Which kind of conference was that? Like,
yeah, it was crazy because there are
in the
snakes
wild
next to people recording TikTok videos. So it's like, wow, these people are amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we did it. But thanks to Joshua, we were well prepared. And
yeah, that's right.
Happened. So thank you.
Okay, so I will start with the first question that I've received from the audience. So this came in many forms, in many shapes, but more or less I summarized it a bit. So with the introduction of AI, the data science landscape has changed, right? So many students were surprised in the middle of a master program in data science or doing a PhD. So they were all asking, so what should future data professionals study? AI things, the traditional data science techniques, or what? So what should they study today to land a decent job tomorrow? Because, they started the data science program thinking that they would land a nice job, and now suddenly some of the techniques are a bit outdated. And this one came at least, in many forms and many shapes.
So can I...
Please.
So actually, I had this question. I was talking to some students in Africa last month, and this analogy came up, and the analogy is, let's say you want to get really good at a sport. That sport gets created in 10 years. You don't know what it's going to be. How do you get as ready as possible, right? So some questions came up, some answers came up, like you have to be really fit, exercise a lot, learn a lot of techniques like kicking, running, swimming. Just be as ready as you can, but be ready to not be ready, right? Be ready that the next technologies are going to have something that's going to throw us off completely new and we have to learn from scratch. But if you basically have a strategy of being as sort of fit mentally as possible, like math will be involved, programming in some way will be involved, the concepts of computer science, the concepts of AI, have as many of these as in your toolkit, then you'll be ready for the next stage, and also be ready to like take real problems and turn them into AI. So we're not gonna know. We're all gonna, the five of us are gonna be lost when the next technology comes in. But if you have enough in your toolkit, I think that's as ready as we can be. So yeah, I don't know. That's my take on it.
So learn to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, get ready and practice your malleability, right? Like adaptability to me is more important than knowledge. Knowledge will get wiped every few years, but the adaptability is what really matters. Like, so if you're really good at a sport, could you play another sport? Well, if you're fit, you can, right? Like with some work. So it's the same thing with AI. Things like neural networks are not going to go for a while, right? Like, just getting better and better. Concepts like regression, concepts like perceptrons, Bayesian stuff, like they're not going to go. They're going to get modified, and they're going to be used as building blocks. So I think you can't go wrong with having a lot of knowledge and practice.
I think along the lines of what Luis was saying in terms of being adaptable, I think something that's really important, sort of in any career, data science is just an example of is the ability to see what actually needs to be done. And be able to do it. It's kind of a funny difference between doing what you're told to do and doing what actually needs to be done. I found, like, with every job I've had, there'll be, expectations of like what you're supposed to do with this job. But I've always found that once I start doing that job, I start asking around and poking around, and I realize that what actually needs to be done is very different from what they put in the job description. And it was critical for me to identify what needed to be done and then do that instead, right? And be somewhat adaptable. They had all these requirements for this one thing that actually didn't need to be done. I mean, it was something that you could do, but it wasn't what they really need. What they really needed was somebody else doing something else. And I've had that time and time again. And I just feel like it's sort of like a universally useful skill to have, is to be curious about what's going on around you, to be curious about what people need and sensitive to that, and then doing that thing. And I found that whenever I can do that, I've been able to earn a paycheck regardless of how things changed.
I want to say two things about the question from Rosaria. The first one is this feeling that we have is the same feeling that I had years ago when I started studying machine learning, and we were asking the same questions, like what do I have to do in order to be a data scientist, in order to be a machine learning engineer. And I remember that back then, even when my master's was called with another name, not data science, we had the same questions, and I remember I was asking these questions to professionals. This is even how I met Rosaria, because I found one of her article. It was an article about time series, and I contacted Rosaria. So we had the same questions years ago. And I really want to highlight what you said, especially Luis, like the flexibility is what you need. I remember my cousin, he created a company about materials, special materials for medicine and this kind of things. And I remember he was saying, I studied engineering and now I feel like I'm successful. But when people approach me and say, how did you do it? What's your secret? It was like, I'm curious and I'm flexible. I like to do stuff. I like to solve problems. And I could have been even a doctor. The point was to, put myself into what I was doing. So I remember that we had the same questions years ago. I had the same questions. So how is it for you, Miguel?
So yeah, I also agree with the point of view of adaptability. At the end of the day, for example, I come from physics, so I also need to adapt myself to this. I wanted to add two things. First of all, it's something that I cover in today's Substack article about the 5 steps to become a machine learning engineer, AI engineer. And the first step was foundations, because nowadays you see a lot of people trying to make the big leap of knowing zero and becoming a machine learning hero in just one course, or just creating one tutorial. And I think that it's necessary not to skip some of the foundations that you need about the statistics, algebra, because even if architectures are going to change, even if new neural networks are going to be invented, new transformers, or maybe architectures that are going to replace transformers and whatever, the mathematical foundations are going to be the same. So if you don't understand what a gradient is, what a Hessian is, what is gradient descent, what is matrix multiplication, you are going to find yourself really lost, and you will end up just connecting to APIs and just being a guy who uses APIs. And for me, that's not exactly what an AI engineer should be doing, or a machine learning engineer. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that I really think that the data scientist role has changed a lot, and it's going to change. In fact, my opinion is that in a few years, data scientists are going to be the machine learning engineers of today. Because I think that if you try to become a data scientist for companies today, you need to focus on how to make your models that you're building like production ready, like to deploy these models, to really solve real use cases. Like learning R or learning scikit-learn or PyTorch and putting everything inside a notebook is not going to be enough in the present and for the future.
So it's true, though, that with the introduction of AI, the role has changed a bit, because we used to create models and we used to train models and then, deploy models and the whole thing. But now a lot of the job is consuming models that somebody else has done and they are somewhere else. So it is true that there is a bit of a change. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I'm just going to say real quick. I think you need both things. You need to know how to use it, and you need to know how it works in the background. And it's okay if they are asynchronous, right? Like it's okay if you're playing with it and seeing the magic that it does, and then on the other side or other day of the week, you start trying to understand what's happening and you join them, I think a lot of things are like that. We learn how to drive, but then we also learn how the car works, and you could know one more than the other one. So that's fine, as long as you pay attention to everything. Go ahead, Miguel.
I was going to say basically the same. Yeah,
I stole it from you.
No. But I think I agree with that. I mean, it's you might learn how to use a transformer, for example, in a production application, or how to implement KV cache for LLMs to really like efficient the tokens that you're using, etc. But then I also agree with Luis that sometimes you're going to find errors, you're going to find issues in production that if you have the knowledge about what's happening under the hood, it's going to be much easier for you to understand or really to optimize. Like, for example, okay, the KV cache is not enough for the kind of system that I want to build. So let's try to optimize this. Let's try to make something that makes the transformer even more efficient or stuff like that. That I think that makes the difference between good ML AI engineers and top ML AI engineers.
Yeah, I just want to kind of almost repeat that word for word, just to emphasize the point that because I think it's so important. There's a big difference between people that, like you're saying, that are just using the APIs, and then there's other people that can actually build solutions, and the solutions might end up being much cheaper. If you're trying to do everything with just the APIs, you've got a very narrow way of a tool set for solving problems, and if you know how the tools work, and you know what other tools are out there that are available and how to combine them, then you have a much broader tool set that you can use to solve problems, and you can do things faster and you can do things cheaper, and much and much more like specific to the problem you have at hand. It's not like, well, we've got this thing and it's sort of what we want and it's close, it's the closest we can get. No, you can actually like customize it to, real specific needs. And so I think all that's very important. So yeah, I just wanted to re-emphasize, because I think that's a big, super important point, that if you have a broader tool set, you can just do more and solve problems in a better way. And I've seen that time and time again in my career.
If you think about it, when do we reach the point where we have to optimize something? It usually happens when you dive into a problem and you need to build something custom. When you reach that point, you realize that you need more than just like connecting APIs or services. You need to dive into a problem that requires a very custom solution. But in order to reach that point, you need to be in the field. So you need to be someone who has knowledge, experience, and usually, especially when I go to conferences or I'm running workshops, what happens is that people come to me and say, okay, do I need to know how this boosting algorithm works? I'm like, probably not. You don't need it. If you're asking me this question, you probably don't need it, because it means that you never reached the point where you had to go beyond the limitations of that algorithm. And only when you have to do that, you understand how to optimize it. And it's not something you do every week. Also for me, it's something that I do when I'm really diving into the problem, because I'm like, okay, I see that I'm touching the limitations here, and there are some constraints, and I need to increase the performance by 2%, which for my company means maybe thousands of euros. And that's the point. This is where you reach something, really important. You're like, okay, I've used that library so much that I'm gonna contribute to it, but you need to reach that point. That's also, for many people, that's not the case. You're not in that situation, I guess.
Okay, so next question. There is another complex question, so let's see. How much of this current AI frenzy is hype and how much is here to stay? Because now everybody does AI, right? Yeah. So it seems there is nothing else. So how much is hype and how much is
Let me
reality?
start because it's a very tough question. I think that the only thing that will stay is Luis, Miguel, and Josh websites and projects. The rest will go away. That's my take. Even my projects will go. The rest will go. So this is my answer. Now I give the mic to Miguel.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to separate, to be honest, between the hype and the real value and the real applications that are put out there. I would say that one of the things that I'm seeing right now with the Gen AI explosion is that many POCs, many proof of concepts are seen as like real applications and are seen as systems that are bringing value. And that's not actually the case. Because something that I saw in like traditional machine learning systems that I don't see that much in the Gen AI systems is the importance, for example, of evaluation. You see many LLM solutions out there that are saying that, oh, this is going to change, I don't know, the health field, or this is going to change whatever field, and this is going to be massive, and the impact in humanity is going to be awesome. And then you see that there are no objective metrics where you can measure that. And that's something that I didn't see in more traditional machine learning systems. Like, for example, I've been working for 5 years with recommender systems, and you will never say this recommender system is amazing without like inputting something about the RPV or something about the metrics or the accuracy or the recall of the model or something like that. So for me, one of the good indicators about hype and non-hype is how professional and how scientists, let's put it this way, is the people who are building the solutions. So yeah, I think that, like a short answer, the amount of hype is massive in this system in the field right now, but I think there are a lot of valuable solutions. I think they are here to stay. Agentic solutions are here to stay, I think. Many of the LLM workflows are also here to stay. The non-coding solutions, like for example, Alessandro is working on, NA10, Zapier, etc., are here to stay as well. But at the same time, we, the audience, need to be really cautious about the extreme amount of hype and of people who are pretending to be building AI when they are just connecting to an API, as Josh said, and just doing that. I mean, that's basically it. So yeah.
It's hype. Yeah, I agree with Miguel, and I wanna add a couple of things. I have 2 litmus tests for hype versus for reality. The first one is, what are you using it for? You could be doing the same thing for 2 different purposes, right? Are you using it for good? Are you using it to help the world? Or are you using it to, as a get-rich-quick scheme, or to manipulate minds, or to you have an agenda? To me, that's a big one. How we use AI is very important. I was trying to emphasize that it must be used for good. And the other litmus test I have is, are you letting it make decisions and guide everything, or are you using it as a tool? If you're using it as a tool, you're doing it right, because the human always has to be somewhere, even if it's less and less every time. We have to be dictating. To me, using AI as a decision maker and letting it run by itself is equivalent to taking a car and putting a brake in the gas pedal and just letting it go. It's not gonna go very well. Whereas if you guide it, even if it's a little bit, it goes to where you want, and you use it as a tool, right? So to me, those are the 2 litmus tests. Are you using it for good or not? And are you using it as a tool, or making it or letting it take your decisions? To me, that's the difference.
Joshua, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I would say it's exactly 73.2% hype, and the remainder is true and will last with forever. No, in all seriousness, I mean, what Luis was just saying is absolutely right, and I think, I mean, when I was younger, everything, we had to code everything by hand, and I love the fact that now coding looks like it's going to be something that we can, rather than do by hand, we can guide. maybe a little rough around the edges, and people are sort of vibe coding sometimes successfully and sometimes not. But it just looks like, sooner or later, coding itself is going to be a process that we guide rather than something where we have to know all of the details about every little thing to do it right. And so I'm excited about that. And I think that's genuinely going to happen. And I think once that happens, coding will become still very much a profession. And I think a lot of people are like, well, wait a minute. If you're just guiding the software development and not actually doing it by hand, what are you doing? Well, when I write software, I basically have to look up everything on the internet and then I copy and paste and things. It's like, it's not knowing the language that matters. It's knowing sort of the bits and pieces of how to break a problem into small parts, or how to outline exactly what you want to get done in a very sort of specific, well-defined way. Because even with AI, if you don't have a well-defined way of doing something, you're going to end up with a disaster, right? So the skills of coding aren't necessarily language dependent. They're how to define the problem, how to define the inputs, how to define the outputs, how to do all those specifications, and that's not going anywhere. So I think coding will change, but it'll change to where it's language agnostic. You won't have to say, I'm a Python programmer and I'm a JavaScript programmer. You just say, I'm a programmer. And I think that's that's a big change that I'm actually genuinely excited about, because that's not the fun part of programming is not like worrying about which language to use. It's worrying about like how to solve this specific problem and the way you solve it is defining all these inputs and outputs and letting, the language take care of that. So I'm a big fan of that, and I think that's for real and will stay with us for a long time.
Yeah, I
really
agree.
That one.
Yeah, now you go first, Miguel.
Okay. No, I was just going to add that I really like the point of view of Josh, because I think, and that's something that I discussed, I think, with Alessandro back in Bangalore, that we were talking about how people tend to obsess with programming languages, with framework, like should I use CrewAI, LangGraph, small agents, or should I go with Python, JavaScript, learn Rust, learn Go? And I think that, like, 100% agree with Josh, because I think people need to start realizing that the important is not to think of AI as individual pieces like the model or this specific framework or this specific programming language, etc., but as a system. When you start thinking of these products as complex systems where you have like multiple components interacting with each other, that's like the valuable skill for the future. So I really agree with Josh in that. Probably it's not about programming, but of being able to frame what you want to build and the individual pieces that you need to build that. So yeah, I really like that point of view.
Yeah, I fully agree with that as well, and Josh with that because, and I also see that it's not new; it's a progression, right? Like the previous generations wrote with punch cards.
Yeah.
And then with assembly. I don't even know how assembly looks like. And then with C++ and Python. And now it's English, but it's still the same concepts, right? It's still the same concepts. And we shouldn't hide behind the syntax. The syntax is not the clever part. The clever part is the concepts that we're using. And I find that when I code in English now, most of the coding I do is just typing, it's just generating. But you still guide it, you still use those concepts and maybe even more because you can get farther.
At some point, the level of abstraction will be so high that we just have to press a button and the button knows what to do. That's it.
So Luis was saying before, it depends on what you do with AI, if it's a good thing or a bad thing. So there is a question about that. So I'm going to ask it now. It was at the end of the pipeline, but I'm going to ask it now because it just came up. So that's a student, I think, asked. So besides automating our work, what can AI be used for? Can AI also be used for something good, like good for humanity, in your experience? What have you seen it used for?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of good things. I mean, the example that I would go for is education, That's kind of my favorite example of how to use it for good, because you can really democratize knowledge. You can bring it to people at many places in different socioeconomic levels, geographic levels, and people who learn differently or later in life, earlier in life. So I feel like that's sort of my favorite application of AI. But you can do a lot of good with it. It's a lot of creativity.
My favorite application of AI so far, which I think is a wonderful thing, is, you may or may not know this, but I am very afraid of snakes. So It's just one of the reasons why when I was in downtown Bangalore at Cubbon Park and I saw a sign that says there will be snakes in the bushes and in holes and things like that, I was like, oh my gosh, there's snakes. Because there's nothing that scares me more than a snake. I just have nightmares about them. I just always stressed out about snakes. But they've used AI to come up with like anti-venoms, like novel anti-venoms that are like there's all these problems with venoms, anti-venoms, because they have really short shelf lives. You can make an anti-venom, but it doesn't last very long, and it's hard to take out into like the wilderness and things like that and have it with you. And I love that they're using AI to create these new ways to deal with snake bites that are shelf stable, so you can get a little vial of it and you can put it in your backpack and you can go into the jungle for a couple of weeks and have a great time. And if you get bit by a snake, you can just pop this thing or whatever. To me, I'm like, oh, that's a miracle. That's a dream come true right there. That's the best thing I could possibly imagine.
Nice.
I feel sorry now that we call the group Speakers and Snakes.
Every time it WhatsApp pings, he's like,
but yeah, right. What did you do, Alessandro? But I mean, at the same time, I'm really glad to see that you're trying to overcome your fears through the WhatsApp group. So
yeah, right.
I'm really glad. Yeah. So for me, I mean, it's pretty much what Luis said. I mean, democratizing is the most important thing, and this is helping humanity. I mean, if you think of my first example, because I'm a big fan, if you think of Arduino, Miguel knows this very well, or the Raspberry. I mean, we managed to bring these small PCs to everyone, and I've seen so many like poor countries getting their hands on something that before that was impossible to think of. I mean, especially with Arduino and the Raspberry, we managed to do something great. And I'm a big fan of those projects, and I saw how many good they did. And this is my take. I really feel that if we democratize these technologies, they will be less expensive and people can start using them. And in the case of the Raspberry, I've seen people using the Raspberry before even touching a smartphone. So that's the idea. I think we're going in that direction.
It's cool.
Other good uses like medicine, for example, healthcare, you can do a lot of advancements with AI, things like fighting misinformation, accessibility. So there's lots of things we can do.
Okay. So there is another question. This is somewhat philosophical, so I'll pass it to you as they sent it to me. Are we training AI or is AI training us? So let's take the job application example. So AI is now running the first candidate selection. You write a CV that is AI compliant. So at the end, are we all going to become AI compliant?
That's a very good reflection. I like it. I mean, if you think about it, I talk about what I read on LinkedIn, on Substack, etc. I don't know in that example, I think we are going to become AI compliant. I mean, but that's exactly the same with some other like areas of our personal lives. I think that you try to hack a system, you need to understand how that system behaves, and then you just act like that. So yeah, in that example, I think people are going to become like AI compliant. I don't know what that means for humanity, if I'm being honest. One other thing that really worries me is that right now, if you take a look at the mostly written content, hopefully, I mean, when we do videos like this one, for example, we are not avatars, at least as far as I know. There are no avatars right now or AI agents pretending to be Alessandro Romano. So yeah, I mean, this is genuine, this is real, as far as I know. But for written content, you can see that everything is AI generated and it's really easy to do. And most of the companies are not creating measures to stop that. They are like investing money to generate more content and to train the models with top performant content creators, etc. So this is something that is going to happen more and more. And I guess that if you train the models with this AI generated content, then we are going to reach some plateau and everything will appear to be the same. Like the same person writing content for multiple applications, for Substack, LinkedIn, for Medium, for all the places. So that's something that worries me much more, to be honest, than the interviewing part. Although, of course, I mean, that's normal. But if you think in the past, we all prepare the interviews. Like, for example, if you want to go to Meta, you were Meta compliant. If you want to go to Google, you were training for Google interviews. And if you want to go to any other company, you were studying some sample questions, like human-like things that they are going to ask. So personally, I don't find that really threatening. The other part, yes, like all the written content that is going to be just the same AI bot generating everything.
Yeah, I think Miguel's a great point that this has happened before. Like, we are compliant to whatever society takes us to, and so we overfit to whatever behaviors we have to have. So even earlier in AI, like for example, my first job was in AI was recommendation systems, and I fear them very much. I mean, I use them and they're useful, but you notice that, for example, yeah, you train the recommendation system to recommend things to you, but then you start acting like the recommendation system. If you have like maybe a little prejudice and you start clicking on certain things and liking certain things, it just takes you to the extreme in that direction, and then it ends up dominating what you think, right? And that's why you see political phenomena that just go way faster, because everybody sort of got pushed by these algorithms. And you can see that with language models as well. Like you can control people's ideas. Let's say we have a bunch of signals, and we tend to converge to like the center of all the people that we know and all the things they say, right? So if you manage to put messages that are all in a particular frame of mind, supporting a particular idea, and that's 90% of what you see, you'll end up just kind of, unless you try really hard, you end up gravitating in that direction. So yeah, these are things that concern me quite a bit. They're not new, but they concern me.
They're not new. That's the point. When you were talking about recommendation system, I was thinking about this guy, Eliparise. He wrote a book called The Filter Bubble, something like this. Now it's kind of old, but back then when people were working on recommendation systems, that was a big problem. And it is exactly what you said. If you are in the bubble, the recommendation system will not let you out. So you're still getting the same input and you're acting like the recommendation system. And maybe based on what you do, the recommendation system says, okay, you're always looking at this party because you not because you are into those ideas, but because you want to see what they say, you want to see what they write, but you're not interested. But then the recommendation system is like, I think you are. I'm going to show you everything about them. And that's the point, So it's not a new thing. We had this problem also years ago, now ages ago. And actually this video from Eliparise, it's a good one. It's a beauty. You should have a look at it.
Yeah, in fact, fun fact about that phenomena that you were relating in the literature of recommender systems, it's called the echo chamber, the echo chamber phenomena. And right now, what people are trying to do, but I mean, people who have good intentions are trying to do, is to use multi-arm bandits from reinforcement learning to add some exploration, to try to get you out of the exploitation. Yeah, serendipity. Yeah.
Okay, so this one is kind of business-like, and actually they asked me to stay anonymous. So
okay.
So AI companies have raised tons of money. So how will they stay in business? Because they have to sell to pay back this money. So are they going to raise the subscription costs? Are they going to introduce hidden ads in the results of the large language models? Are they going to just quietly disappear? I mean, feels a bit like a bubble because of all the money they are raising, and somehow they have to give them back. Do you have an answer for that?
I think they'll find creative ways to get our money. Like, what drives me crazy? I don't know if this is related, but people used to have like TV cable services back in the day, and then everybody just switched to Netflix. And now there's like 10 Netflixes. And if I want to watch a movie, I have to pay for like 10 different things. So it went back to worse, And like, I don't know, like that happens with a lot of things. Like Uber made taxi made the getting a taxi much easier, but then gets more expensive and it ends up being worse. So I don't know. I feel like I'm not a business person, but I trust that they'll find ways to take our money. That's one thing I'm confident is.
Yeah, they'll figure it out.
Of that.
And you won't like it. Whatever they do, it's gonna make you miserable.
Oh, I guarantee.
Yeah.
Yeah. Putting ads when they charge you, and then they also put ads. Like, come on. It's like you pay for the service and then you watch the movie and there's ads.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be funny that translated into LLMs, the kind of ads that the LLM is going to say.
Yeah, and
it's going
that
to try to sell you some shampoo, for example. The LLM. Have you checked this?
Yeah, that drives me crazy, right? Because you know how we've developed a thing of like when I Google search, I start looking from the third onwards, right? Because you never look at the first two because they're
Yeah,
like
yeah.
ads. Because it's clear, it's like ad, result.
Yeah,
When LLMs right now we're in the stage of LLMs of when the internet started, that everything was like honest, right? You would just see the web page immediately. Now it's like we're at that stage with LLMs, but whenever LLMs start getting all the commercials, and then you're not gonna know because it's just gonna be like, well, you know what? You should just go get this shampoo. I think it's gonna help you, and you don't know if it's true or because of the ad, and it's just gonna be all hidden. So I'm kind of
that's going to
I'm
be
kind of
crazy.
concerned. That I don't
That's
really
going
know.
to be crazy. Yeah, yeah,
I will
absolutely.
get the shampoo if I get the.
Probably get
If
the
this is coming from an LLM, I should definitely trust.
Yeah, but the thing in there, talking about the number of like Netflix and Amazon Prime, etc., is that probably Cloud is going to tell you one shampoo and ChatGPT another shampoo and the other one a shampoo. So you will end up with, okay, I don't know what to choose.
We need
Let's
to get
search
them
in
all.
Google, like traditional search.
see what shampoo that gives you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, this looks like the episode from the last season of.
I was
Black
gonna
Mirror.
say, yeah.
Exactly. Did you watch that?
The one where she tells
Which
commercials all the time.
Yeah, she does commercials.
In Black Mirror, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Black Mirror. Yeah.
exactly.
It will be like that. We're gonna pay a premium to not to wake up in the night and say to your wife, "Hey, buy this shampoo. This is gonna be great."
Wake up with a black eye. Get this cream.
My girlfriend will buy it 100%. So
Okay, so another question is so how would you advise to learn AI? What steps should a newbie take to master AI? This is more educational.
I have the recommendation I give, and I'd love to hear your ideas, but I don't know why I always go to sports analogies, but if a kid wants to learn, for example, football or soccer, right? A lot of experts for AI just say, go learn all the calculus, all the math, all the programming, and then come back and learn AI. I'm not a big fan of that. It may work, but it's like if a kid starts wanting to play soccer and you just say, read all these 10 books about physics and the rules of soccer and yada yada, and then you can kick a ball. And just give him a ball and let him kick it for a while. And let him get used to it. See if they like it. And then after a while, they're like, okay, you know what? You now want to kick it in here. Here's the rule. Here is the technique. Here's offside. And if they become really good, then you start really training them and the skills. So I find that like the usage should go a little bit ahead. Even if you're first playing around. Like how I started learning AI, I just took a data set and started plotting it and drawing things, and then I saw, it looked like a line, so I want to find out linear regression, and I learned it because I had seen a line looking thing in the data set. So I feel like playing around is just important. Again, it works for me. Other people work differently. So playing around, and then as you play around, start looking at the theory and then focus on what you like. Some people are really good at the tech side. Some people are really good at the data analyzing part. Some people at the math. Just pick your battles and just kind of follow your joy. That's the only way I can learn. I have huge learning difficulties, so I pretty much have to amuse myself. Otherwise, I don't learn. So I assume others are like that. But some people work. Everybody works differently. But I don't know. I'd love to hear what all of you think, because I'm curious.
Along the lines of what Luis was just saying, what I like to do is, I use this for when I want to learn anything, not just AI, but anything I want to learn. I start off with something like a problem I actually want to solve. So, for AI, you could say, I want to invite all my neighbors over for a party. How do I do that? How can I use AI to do that? And you start fiddling around with AI to see if you can come up with a way to do, scheduling and look at people's calendars and things like that. You'll learn a lot in the process of trying to solve a specific problem. So I always recommend starting off with something you want to do, like, for example, like when I was younger and I wanted to learn how to cook, I had a specific goal. I wanted to make a loaf of bread, right? And so I started getting into baking that way. And music is the same way. Like, I wanted to play a song. Well, how do you play a song? You got to start somewhere. So I've always had these goals. I'm a very goal-oriented person. So not everyone's a goal-oriented person. But if you are a goal-oriented person, like I like to start with a real specific problem that I want to solve, and then I try to use whatever the technology is or whatever the books I have or whatever I have around to see if I can't find a solution to that problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree 100% with that, because that's for example, the philosophy that I follow on the neural maze. 100%. What I tell, like the audience, etc., is you need to find something that really resonates with you and try to build it. I mean, it doesn't make any sense for you to learn all the machine learning algorithms, all the deep learning algorithms, all the new transformer architectures that are popping up every day, all the RAG techniques, every agent architecture. Doesn't make any sense. Try to solve something that resonates with you and then try to implement it. And as you will progress, I mean, you will have a lot of problems. Everything will fail. Sometimes you will be like, okay, I don't know how to proceed with this, but that's how you learn at the end of the day. So yeah. 100%.
So, same for me. I'm goal oriented. Is my only trigger. I need a goal, and then as you said, I'll use any kind of technology or methodology. It doesn't really matter. I want to maybe fix that specific issue, or I want to create something new. And most of my projects and most of my personal projects are basically driven by a goal, a specific goal. I want to do that. It's complicated. I know that I can, I don't know, I know 20% of the solution, and the rest is a mix of a lot of new stuff that I'm going to learn. And I try to also explain this when I do mentoring. And something I learned from the people that I'm mentoring is that not everyone are goal oriented. So some people don't work in that way. For me, it's a huge trigger having a goal, and I'll do everything to make things work. But for some people, it's not like this. So it's also complicated. But I believe that most of us probably work in that way. You need a goal to feel motivated. Otherwise, no way you're gonna understand how last aggression works for real. If you don't have something good you can apply that for. That's my take probably.
Okay, so I have the final question. Any final tips, any final advice for the young data scientists aspiring to become AI experts? One piece of advice that you would give to the young aspiring data scientists?
Maybe I'll do two. Be ready to change several times. You know, that paradigm of grandpa who learned one thing at 20 and used it for the rest of their lives is gone. So be ready to change a few times, to pivot. It's not a bad thing. We all pivoted later in life. So yeah, and follow your joy and do good to the world. That's all I try to do.
One thing that's helped me is always try to think of within my limitations. I always try to ask myself, what's the most important thing I could be doing right now? I ask myself that question all the time. And sometimes the most important thing for me to do is to work on a StatQuest video, because, you know, that's how people know who I am. And that's what I do really well, and I have a gift for that. But sometimes the most important thing for me to do is take a break, because I need rest. You know, you can't just work 24/7 and stay alive. And, you know, if I died next week from overwork, then that would be a disaster, and I wouldn't be able to complete all the work that I'm supposed to be completing. So I'm always asking myself at every stage, sort of, is this the most important thing I could do? And sometimes that means relaxing, and sometimes that means thinking about what I'm working on. What's the project I'm working on? Is this really that important? Is there something else that could be better? I'm always asking that question and revising, trying to optimize it at all times. So that's something that again, it's not necessarily data science or AI specific, but just life in general. Just think about how important, whatever you're doing, how important is that? And if it's not important, then you need to change.
Yeah, pretty good. I want to add something to it. I always say something and then I add something later.
Yep.
But I find I like what you said, the most important thing. I find that I like to align two things, and when they're aligned, I'm happy. So one thing is, what do you like to do for fun, just for fun? Like, what do you like to do that if nobody was watching? Do you like to do Sudokus, or do you like to play something? That's one thing. The other one is, what do you want the world to be, right? Like, what world do you want? And sometimes they're different, but if you manage to align the two and be like, I'm doing one thing that I really enjoy and that also just takes me, even if it's at slow pace, or even if it's 1 millimeter towards the world that I want, I feel like aligning those two is something that I always try to do.
That's probably also my way of working. That's my advice. Try to find an overlap between the things that you like and maybe some things that could be useful for others. But I've never seen this as a 100% overlap. So for me, it's like, okay, there are some things that, as you said, are giving me joy. I like to work on maybe a specific problem because I know that it is exciting and it's challenging and I like it. And in some cases, this has a huge overlap with maybe what people are looking at in that moment. One example is when I started like talking about AI agents some years ago already. And I remember that, I don't want to say which conference, but someone called me, it's like, hey, do you have something interesting for this year? And I said, yeah, I'm working on this topic. Like, we don't think it's gonna be successful. We want to talk about pandas and polars. And I said, I don't want to talk about pandas and polars. I talked about that already. I want to do something different. And they didn't like it. They were like, AI agents, what's this thing? And they didn't want me. I'm happy when conferences are rejecting me because I go to too many conferences anyhow. But I was like, okay, if you are the experts, and I didn't care much. I kept working on it because I liked it. And there are many projects, and I'm really excited when people ask me about my projects because you can't imagine how many things I'm doing that will not see the light, but I just like them. That's the point. And I think that I'm also lucky, and probably it's the same for all of us, that some of these things have a huge overlap with what people are looking for at this moment in this kind of period. But otherwise, it's about like, okay, having fun. And then of course, if we are all here, it's also because of hard work. But maybe we'll talk about hard work in another episode because it's a very tough topic. No one wants to know what's behind our projects.
We don't want to discourage them.
We don't want to talk about that. What do you think, Miguel?
Yeah, I mean, pretty aligned with what you say. One thing I would tell the aspiring data scientists, machine learning engineers, is that they should ask themselves one question, and do I really like AI? Do I really want to work during my days about AI? Or am I doing this because of the fear of missing out, because of FOMO? That's for me the critical question, because I agree with all of them, and you really need to enjoy what you're doing. I mean, otherwise it's going to be hell for you. It's going to be a disaster because you will end up doing things that, yeah, they are really cool because everybody is talking about this, but I mean, hypes, there might be a bubble and the bubble might burst at some point. And I mean, do you want to spend your whole life studying something and working on something that you don't really like? So for me, that's the reason why I always suggest to keep away FOMO and try to embrace JOMO, I think it's called, the joy of missing out. So yeah, that's my philosophy. If you want to build, like Alessandro was saying, if you want to build something that is really cool and it's not trendy and it's not about LLMs or whatever, I mean, if you really like it, then go ahead and do it because it's the only way that you're going to be happy. Otherwise, you're going to chase FOMO and you're going to be mad at the end of the day. So yeah.
I love that JOMO. I'm gonna use it if I get invited to something I don't want. I'm like, I think I'm gonna have JOMO.
Yeah. Consider it stolen already.
I love it.
Yeah, it's gonna stick.
The joy,
for sure.
joy of missing out.
Tomorrow, Josh, Luis, Alessandro, Rosaria all writing about JOMO link.
Exactly.
JOMO,
Of
course. Of course.
I love it.
Okay, so that was the last question. So I hope you liked the questions, and you've been great. I mean, the involvement was fantastic.
Yeah. This is.
Thank you.
It's gonna be great.
It was amazing.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and also thanks Rosaria because she is the host for this episode. Yeah, if you wanna spend like one last word and say goodbye, otherwise we can just say even if the bubble will burst, the neural maze will stay. Can we say something like this?
I don't know.
We can say JOMO, not FOMO.
JOMO, not FOMO. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. I think that's better.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
No, but thank you so much, Rosario. You're a great host. Thank you very much, Alessandro and Josh and Miguel. I love hanging out with you, regardless. So the fact that it got recorded is a bonus. So thank you.
It is.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.